Okay, so let's move on to part two of history. And in this particular section, we'll talk about the famous people, the people who left a mark on our industry and shaped it to what it's today. Okay, so let's get started with famous people. All right, this is David Ogilvy. He is one of the biggest names in our industry. Okay. And I love this quote. And most people who are in advertising would probably know it. The consumer isn't a moron. She's your wife. Okay. The consumer isn't a moron. She's your wife. Which basically means don't underestimate your consumer, right? He says, you insult her intelligence if you assume that a mere slogan and a few adjectives will persuade her to buy anything. She wants all the information you can give her. Okay, so David Mackenzie Ogilvy, he's an advertising tycoon of sorts, right? He founded Ogilvy and Mather. O&M is the name that you may be familiar with when you're looking things up. You will find Ogilvy or O&M, and David Ogilvy is the father of advertising. Okay, um, he just absolutely cared about research. He's telling you in this quote, and that kind of is his philosophy. uh, do the research, let the research inform any strategy that you put together. Okay, so research was super important to him. Father of advertising, founder of Ogilvy and Mather. This is David Ogilvy. Okay, the consumer isn't a moron, she's your wife. Let's move on to the next person who we call the father of the creative revolution, Bernbach. All right, so let's read the quote. All of us who professionally use the mass media are the shapers of society. We can vulgarize the society, we can brutalize it, or we can help lift it onto a higher level. Okay, now Bill William Bernbach, he, is really a big name in the industry. And he, founded DDB, which is, basically three partners, Doyle, Dane, and Bernbach, DDB. That's his agency. And, what he said was, he almost insisted that, first you learn about your client's products. You learn how your client's products relate to the target audience, right? Before you create anything, this is an important thing for you to do, all right? So that is Bill Bernbach. Okay, let me move on to the next person. And this guy, his name is Marion Harper. Okay, at a very young age, he became the president of McCann Erickson. This is another big agency. By the way, Ogilvy, DDB, McCann Erickson, all of these exist today. Okay, so it's nice to know the history. I'm making it as relevant to you as possible. Okay, now in the 1960s, he launched the Interpublic Group of companies. As you remember, when we looked at the list of all of those big holding companies, Interpublic was one of them. Okay, so it was launched in 1960, and the whole concept of a holding company started around this time. So this is Marion Harper Jr. Okay, and you may have seen some of these ads here. Of course, some of them are shockers right now, right? But at that time, They were very new, very unique. Um, Men wouldn't look at me when I was skinny, but then I gained 10 pounds. Okay, well, she can have as many dates as she wants. But that is one of those ads, um, and it's silly when you think about it right now, some of these ads. But look at the second one, Alka-Seltzer. You've heard of this brand. It's a very old brand. So you have acid indigestion, go ahead and have some Alka-Seltzer. Okay. Quick milk gets milk in them, but quick, right? So Nestle owns that product. I think it still exists in some different form. Of course, 7 Up, as you may have known. Okay, so all of these are Marion Harper's products. Product as in his ads on these products. Okay, and it's this ad agency that created them. Okay, let's move on to the next one. And this is Leo Burnett. I absolutely love the work of Leo Burnett. And of course, this is the founder of the agency. The name is Leo Burnett, right? He created just some amazing products, right? So the Green Giant, the Pillsbury Doughboy, the Charlie the tuna, Tony the tiger. All of these products are, it's all him. It's all his company. And if you can't seem to remember some of the products here, well, I have little photos for you to jog your memory. So Green Giant, you get vegetables from Green Giant. Tony the Tiger, you probably know. Charlie the Tuna, you probably have seen. And then, of course, um, you know, the Doughboy, right? Pillsbury. It's the cutest little thing that they've created there. So that's that. And then, of course, Marlboro. Marlboro is, if you don't know, it's a cigarette brand. And, it became really big around his time, around all of these launches. You had the Marlboro launch as well, and Marlboro became really big thanks to Leo Burnett work. Of course, if he knew then how bad cigarettes were for the world, he may have never created these things. But at that time, nobody knew. Okay, let's move on. So we've talked about few people, right? We started with David Ogilvy. We moved to Bill Bernbach. We talked about Marion Harper. We talked about Leo Burnett. And now let's talk about Rosa Reeves. Okay, so, this term, unique selling proposition, you hear it quite a lot when you talk about marketing. You hear it on the floor when you're working, and they don't really say unique selling proposition. They will just say, what's your USP? What's your USP, right? And what that means is, what is so special about your product? You need to come up with that one or two very special things that differentiate your product from the competition, and talk about that. Okay, and that's what's going to sell your product. And that was Rosa Reeves who said that. Okay, so coined that term USP. And of course, not only do you pick that one item and talk about it, one little feature and talk about it, you talk about it multiple times, right? So that's repetition. So he talked about these two things. And around the time, the 1950s and 60s, when he started to do this work, he did a lot of work for Colgate and Listerine. Yes, those products were around at that time. And that's what made those products pretty successful. Okay. And in the 1950s, he also helped elect a president. And so, you started to see changes in the way political campaigns were run. And it all started in the 1950s. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the products that he worked on. So let's look at Colgate. That's right there, of course. Stop bad breath. So the focus here was bad breath to decay, right? Fight to decay, fight bad breath. Colgate's going to help you with that, right? So that is very much the unique selling proposition of Colgate, and they still continue to do that. Okay, M&Ms, right? Melts in your mouth, not in your hands. I mean, that's one thing you do know about these little cute little candies, right? That you put them on the hand, your hands will not become, red and blue and green and yellow, whatever those colors, bright colors of those candies are. So that was clearly the unique selling proposition of M&Ms. He decided that that is what needs to be shared with the world, and he kind of just focused on that quality of that product. Okay, so melts in your mouth, not in your hand. Okay, Anacin is all about relief from tension, headaches. Again, so we're really talking about one feature that you pick about your product and you highlight that feature. Always ask yourself, what is the unique selling proposition of this product and how can I highlight it in my ads? Okay, so you must make the product interesting, not just the ad different. Okay, so your ad can be really cool and unique, but if you don't highlight a specific feature of that particular product, it may not be as successful. Um, you know, um, so that is Russell Reeves with USP, unique selling proposition. Okay, let's move on to finally a woman, Mary Wells Lawrence. Mary Wells Lawrence. Okay, um, you know, I checked a few months ago. She was still alive. She was 99 or something, and I don't know if she's alive yet. I hope she is. I don't know. Mary Wells Lawrence was the founding president of Wells Rich and Green. Okay, one of the first female CEOs on the NYSE, and when she was, part of this company, she had some amazing, very big clients. Okay, some you may have heard of, like Cadbury, IBM, Sheraton, P&G, um, you know, Alka-Seltzer, you may have heard of, right? Braniff, maybe not, but I'm going to, tell you a little bit more about Braniff. And then, Midas Touch, right? You've got the Midas Touch. So, like even I would say by 1976, she was making 300,000 a year, right? We're talking about 1976. Okay, so she was doing really well. Named one of the top newsmakers, of the 1960s, by a magazine called Advertising Age. She was only 40 when she was inducted into the Copywriters Hall of Fame. 1971 Advertising Woman of the Year by the AAF, Advertising, American Advertising Federation. I mean, she's just super productive in her career and really quite successful with the things that she did. So let me show you some of the ads that she's worked on. So, the I Love New York t-shirts that you see sometimes people wearing, or if you're in New York and you walk the streets and you see I Love New York, a lot of the souvenirs have I Love New York. It all was created by Mary under Mary Wells. Okay, so that was the lady who actually created, like, did the copy for it was Jane Mass, but it was all done under the leadership of Mary Wells. Okay, so Plop Plop, Fizz Fizz, Alka Seltzer had this kind of cool product, cool ads, and it's still kind of relevant today, right? I mean, you put one of those tablets in a glass, and that's kind of what you hear. I can't believe I ate the whole thing. There was another one like that. Try it, you'd like it. That was another Alka-Seltzer ad tagline. At Ford, at Ford, quality is job one, right? That was, of course, this was out of Detroit, right? And cars were starting to become the big thing around this time. Oh, you probably heard of Bic, right? The pen, Flick Your Bic. That's absolutely her as well. Oh, raise your hand if you're sure, like the deodorant sure, right? So this is all Mary Wells. Okay, and then of course using Braniff. So silly ads, but the end of the plane. Okay, plane. So they try to make the plane kind of like a um, cool thing, and you should get on this plane because you'll have a cool experience. Um, and there were a lot of women in this particular ad. Of course, the target audience for the brand of ad was not women but men. Okay, so real kind of cool stuff in terms of the work that she did. And I want to show you guys a little video. So let's see if I can actually do that. But before I do, let me tell you what the video is about. So to make Braniff became really famous because Mary Wells came up with something called the air strip. Okay, so of course, as a pun on that word, air strip, as in the strip where the runway where the airplane takes off, right? But there was also a strip, like a little strip show, of course. Um, Nothing so censored when you think about today's day and age, but you basically saw the air hostess, take off a couple of her clothes and put in like do a little fashion show. Okay, so get out of those bundled New York winters and loosen up, complete with a stewardess stripping off a hat and a scarf and a coat and some more layers, right? So scandalous for that time. Okay, but kind of sweet. So this is her print campaign, and she had a TV campaign as well. So let me see if I can actually show that to you.
Since you on the airplane, should we dress like this? When she brings you your dinner, she'll be dressed this way. After dinner on those long flights, she'll slip into something a little more comfortable. The airstrip is brought to you by Burnett International, who believes that even an airline hostess should look like a girl.
Okay, that's interesting, right? So that's all Mary Wells. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And this is Resor. Okay, so this is, I think I would say 1911 or so. It's like, it's like really, really early on. And she was one of the greatest sort of copywriters of her time. Um, Also the founders of the 4As, and we talked about the 4As, like one of the associations was the American Association of America, right? Okay, so this is Resor, and really, just was one of the first women to work on copywriting. And for her, it was all about the sex appeal, right? So now think about sex appeal, not today, but in 1911, that definition was very different. So let me show you some of the ads that she's worked on. Let's see. All right. So let's look at some of these ads. A skin you love to touch. A skin you love to touch. Okay. And so that was sort of the tagline, the big idea, right? And it was all about, a man touching a woman. And that was sex appeal. Like that's kind of how it was defined, right? Very interesting. beautiful portraits almost of ads, and women at this time were allowed to work on just female products. Um, doesn't seem like a big deal now, but in 1910, this was one of the first campaigns that was created that had a little bit of that sort of sex appeal. Okay, so one of, I would say, the first copywriters, female copywriters of our time. And of course, this brand is Woodbury, the soap, right? Okay, here's some more. You too uh, can have a skin you love to touch. Okay, facial soap. Okay, let's move on to the last person in this particular setup. And this guy, he's called Martin Sorrell. For the longest time, he was the head of WPP. I don't think he is the head anymore. But he invested in WPP in 1985. And then, you know what it used to be? It used to be like one of those shopping cart companies, and he bought that, and then he started to add advertising companies inside of it, and so now it became from a shopping cart company to an advertising company, right? In 87 he took over J. Walter Thompson, which is an ad agency. It was kind of like a hostile takeover, and kind of the way I would define that is he probably took away all their clients or something, right? And or just undercut them in some way, right? And so then they were just forced to sort of sell. And so you see a lot of that kind of stuff, around this time when more and more companies are being bought over, right? In 89, he bought Ogilvy and Mather. So just look at the numbers. Insane, right? 825 million. I mean, that's crazy. Now, Ogilvy, because we talked about David Ogilvy, right? So his company was bought over and now is part of WPP, continues to be. And like that, he's sort of bought, several companies. By the way, he's British. He's a British guy. He still lives there, but I don't think he heads WPP anymore. I think he retired a couple of years ago. So WPP is the world's largest marketing, advertising group. It's got more than 40 companies inside of it. Not all of them are advertising. Some of them are PR and digital and events and a bunch of different options there. So Martin Sorrell. So now we've talked about so many different famous people, and you can dig deeper if you like. When you watch something like Mad Men, the show, it kind of depicts the era, so to speak, of when all of this stuff was happening, and the political stuff, and how the women fit into that stuff, and the kind of ads that they created, and the atmosphere that was in advertising at that time. So it's really interesting to see how Mad Men has the show has recreated, so to speak, this little world. Okay, so all of these different famous people. I hope you learned something new about our little world here today.